welcome. Let me just pause that since we're jamming out here. Well, hello, and welcome back to Confessions from the Other, Season 5. This week's episode is Part 5. It's called Unsane. Unsane in the membrane. No, it's just Unsane. But this week we go into a little bit of Bryce's backstory. See what happened to him and why his life is so fucked up, basically. And then, yeah. And then more events happen at the movie theater. So yeah, let's get into this. Let's get started with Part 5, Unsane. Yeah, so here we go. We're going back to 2012. Bryce is swerving and speeding through a neighborhood and takes another sip of alcohol. He goes to set his bottle of whiskey down on the console, but drops the bottle down and it falls to the floor of his car. He bends over to grab the bottle, and when he comes up, a flash of a little boy walking in the street before him. As he slams on the brakes, he hits the boy of about 3 years old. The boy is hit with such a force that he flies headfirst into the windshield and snaps off his body. The little boy's head is stuck in the windshield while his body is flopping on the trunk of the car. Bryce got his third DUI that night and vehicular manslaughter for the murder of a 3-year-old boy. He was convicted as mentally ill and sentenced to Edgewater Sanitarium for life. He was released in 2014 when the sanitarium closed down. The board had come to the conclusion that probation would suit him since he had been on good behavior while staying at the sanitarium.
About what I spent on some jewelry, but it all comes back to me usually, and it's none of y'all's business, truthfully. Y'all know about the fame, what it do to me. I'm talking to myself like every night. You could try to be a better guy, but to understand a Gemini, angel devil, it's both him and I. Demons in me, they just multiply. If I don't kill them or I never try. Life is short and men lie, women lie, but a legend, he can never die. You know?
Ever seen an angel with someone? Everybody got their own demons. Everybody fights in their own war. I can be an angel sometimes. I can be real fucked up. I miss you only sometimes. I give you real tough love. Yes, I'm a devil with a halo. Ooh, oh, 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 oh.
Yeah.
I don't wanna wake it up. I don't wanna wake it up. I don't wanna wake it up. The devil in me. I don't wanna wake it up. I don't wanna wake it up. I don't wanna wake it up. The devil in me. Gotta wake up. 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 Come back to life. Gotta wake up. Gotta wake up. Gotta wake up. Gotta wake up.
Back to present day at the movie theater. Everyone at the theater is on high alert due to the fact of the recent killings that have been happening surrounding the theater and the mall. Alert is so high that corporate has decided to make an appearance sometime within the next 24 hours. Auth Corp has sent 2 of its finest members to visit the theater. Safine is working in her office. Amanda is managing Bryce in box office. Santiago in concessions, and Lexi is working the booth position, getting the theater ready for the new films opening that coming weekend. Nate ends up coming in early because Safine advised him about corporate and wanted him to be prepared for their visit. All of a sudden, a woman and a man in business suits approach the box office and ask for assistance in finding a manager on site. Bryce speaks into the walkie-talkie and asks for Safine to come to box office. Safine shows up a couple minutes later and asks them to follow her back to her office. Nate and Amanda peer through the window and watch them fade around the corner of the hall. Nate asks Amanda if Jackie had called in this morning, and Amanda replied by telling him that they haven't heard from Jackie at all and she was a no-call, no-show again. Nate had the feeling that something else was wrong. Amanda walks out of the box office, and Santiago runs to the window at box office and says, "Dude, you guys, that chick that was just in concessions was Connor's ex-girlfriend, and she's with some new dude. Man, if Connor were here, he'd be so pissed. Dude, she just stopped responding to him and totally blocked him from her life." Bryce interrupts and says, "Santiago, no one cares." Nate responds with, "Yeah, what Bryce said. I am more concerned on what's up with corporate." Santiago walks back over to the concession stand, and Bryce asks, "Hey, can I go to the bathroom?" Nate says, "Yeah, that is fine. I will watch box." Bryce walks out of the office and starts walking down the hallway and walks into the men's restroom. (1997) Bryce's parents are driving late one night and it's raining hard outside. One minute they are smiling at each other and Bryce's mom looks back at him in the back seat of the car. Bryce is passed out at 12 years old, strapped in with his seatbelt on. All of a sudden, the car goes around a corner and skids on some water and loses control. The car hits the guardrail and flips over the side of the road 3 times down a ravine. Bryce's parents are both dead as his mother lay on the hilltop, breathless on the dirt, and his father still behind the wheel, but a tree branch is gutting his stomach. Bryce is still strapped in the seatbelt in the back seat, hanging upside down until authorities found the car almost 4 hours later. Bryce never woke up once. Back to the theater, present day. Bryce is walking back down the hall to the box office when he notices a weird smell coming from the break room. He gets nosy, so he decides to investigate. He walks through the break room doors, and a little boy runs down the stairs of the hole in the wall and giggles. Bryce looks terrified as he begins to step forward towards the entrance. All of a sudden, Safine and the 2 corporate people are standing in the doorway of the break room. Bryce screams in horror. Safine says, "Bryce, calm down, chill, it's just me." Bryce snaps out of it while screaming more and says, "Oh God, I'm sorry, I thought I saw something." Safine says, "Go back to box office." Bryce walks out of the break room and the one woman with the suit on says in an English accent, "This hole in the wall really causes issues with the theatre. I would say seal it off and cover it back up. Obviously, it hasn't been used for nearly a century." The man in the suit responds with, "I would consider keeping it locked. We need to put an actual lockable door on it and just keep it hidden and away from normal staff. People below the authorities shouldn't have access to dark corners like this anyways." Safine says, did you just say dark corners?" The woman interrupts and says, "Enough. We shall decide what to do with this entrance once we get back to corporate headquarters." Back over at the box office, Colby arrives for his shift and he is clocking in and says to Nate, "Hey dude, I'm super worried about Anthony. He was supposed to report to his officer this morning about shipping out tomorrow and no one has heard from him. He never came home the other night after the Halloween party. Apparently his mother is just a mess." Nate says, "That is weird. And you are certain the party was the last time you have seen him? Colby says, yes, Nate, I wouldn't lie to you. Maybe you should call that Detective Mills guy and let him know about his disappearance. Nate walks over to the computer and says, oh, I'm sure that his mother was on top of that. And in fact, I'm sure that him and Buffy knows. In the manager's office, the man and the woman dressed in black suits were just getting ready to leave Safine in the office until she finally got the nerve to tell them what had been going on at the theater. Safine begins, as of late, you know, what has been going on around the mall area in the theater area. But I have got to tell you that some weird shit has been going on since that hole in the wall was accidentally found. Now, I don't know where those tunnels lead, and I don't want to know because this shit freaks me the fuck out. So whatever you decide at your corporate headquarters, please keep in mind the staff of your lovely theater and their health. The woman says, with all due respect, you work for us, Safine. The woman rubs her fingers on her green necklace that she is wearing, and Safine's facial expression changes. Now remember, try and keep the staff away from that entrance in those tunnels. We had plans for that. Safine says, absolutely. And I do apologize for any inconvenience. Please let me know your decision when you get back. The man says, great. We shall be in touch. The man and woman walk out of the office and shut the door behind them. Bryce's Uber ride pulls up to an apartment complex. Bryce steps out of the car and walks down the sidewalk to his building. He walks inside to the door that says 3 and unlocks the door and walks into the apartment. He takes his book bag off and he takes out his phone and tries to call Jackie. The phone rings until Jackie's voicemail picks up. He then tries to call Anthony and that phone call goes straight to voicemail as well. Bryce begins to worry a bit about where his friends were and more importantly what had happened to them. He hears a little laugh again this time throughout his apartment. Bryce begins to tear up a little bit and then calls Lexi. Lexi and her boyfriend Marty stop by Bryce's apartment on their way home from dinner. Lexi says, "There's nothing here, Bryce. You are just tired and hearing things." Bryce says, "Are you sure? Because ever since that board was played, I have been hearing shit everywhere I go." Lexi looks at Marty and says, "What did you say?" Bryce says, "Yeah. Apparently, Nate, Jackie, and Connor played with that Ouija board a couple weeks ago after a screening, and they did it in the break room next to that creepy fucking hole in the wall." Lexi says, "Really? I take it Safine doesn't know about this?" Bryce says, "Probably not. Who cares? That shit is creepy as fuck." Lexi says, "Look, Bryce, just remember it's not real. That stuff doesn't exist. Nothing happened and you are fine. Just relax and get some sleep." Bryce says, "Fine, but I'm not crazy." Back to 2013 at Edgewater Sanitarium. Jackie says, well, thank the gods that I'm only in here for a 72-hour hold. I'll be home in no time. So what in the hell are you doing in a place like this? Bryce says, about 6 months ago I got my third DUI and it's just bad. I hurt someone, Jackie. I hurt them real bad, like they're dead. Jackie says, oh my God, Bryce, I had no idea. I thought you were just doing your own thing and taking a break. Bryce says, no. My brother had me committed instead of pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter, so this was the better option. Jackie says, well, I'm here for you, buddy. You know that. If you ever need anything, please call me. I love you, Bryce. Bryce is lying in his bed and he keeps hitting redial on his phone of Jackie's phone number. It keeps going straight to voicemail until the last ring. A message finally comes on telling Bryce that the voicemail box is full. He lays there in silence as a tear falls down his cheek. He doesn't know who else to talk to about this kind of stuff. Now that Jackie was missing, he had no other people in his life that he thinks he could trust. He would like to send a text to Nate, but he knows that he would get in trouble if work found out. He thought to himself that he needs to get over this fear and depression, that there is no kid that he is seeing everywhere and that it is only in his head. He starts scratching at his head and looks over his shoulder, and the little boy that he ran over is staring back at him from the corner of his bedroom. He screams. The next day at the movie theater, Nate is in a frenzy because Santiago hasn't shown up for his shift yet. He was an hour late, and this wasn't the first time. Even though Santiago was one of Safine's personal assistants around the facility, Nate didn't give a shit anymore. He was fed up with the behavior of some of the staff at the theater, and he was going to put it to paper. About 10 minutes after he started filling out paperwork to write up Santiago and terminate him, he finally shows up with Connor in tow. Connor was also 10 minutes late. Nate approaches both of them and advises Connor that he was late and that he needs to be more responsible with his time management, and gave him a verbal warning. After Connor smiles and apologizes, Nate asks Santiago to step into the back office to have a word with him. Nate radios for Safine to join them in the back office as well. As soon as Safine walks into the room, the cold draft blows through everyone. Nate begins explaining the procedures to both of them and finalizes 4 forms. The first 2 forms were for a no-call, no-show for twice that Santiago didn't show up for his shift and notify a member of management. And the third form was for him being tardy earlier in his shift and again not notifying a member of management. The final and 4th form was his termination paper. He slid the paper over to Santiago and he didn't say a word. He picked up a pen off the desk and signed all 4 papers. Nate interrupts. I'm sorry, but we as management and the company have decided to part ways with your employment here. We need reliable and strong people to work here. Unfortunately, you just don't fit the qualifications. Santiago looks at Safine, and she just looks at him with her wide open eyes and nods her head. Nate says, now I'll need to escort you out of the building. Santiago stands up and says, no need. I will leave on my own. He begins walking out of the office and slams the door behind him. Safine's eyes close in hesitation, and Nate begins walking after him, yelling his name. Another door slams shut as the box office door makes a loud noise. Connor and Steph stare from concessions as Santiago walks out of the theater. Connor says, well, there goes my ride home. Welcome back. Steph approaches Safine's... Bleh. Let me start over. Steph approaches Safine wanting to talk about a sore subject for her. Steph is sitting in Safine's office crying. Safine is just sitting in her chair staring at Steph as she is explaining what is going on to her. Safine is thinking that this is more bullshit going on at the theater because she didn't need anyone or any more drama at her home away from home. Steph says, I just don't know what to do about this. I feel threatened. I fear for my life. Nate has got to put up some boundaries up, and I just can't be around him. He makes me feel sick. I don't feel like coming into work anymore. I don't feel safe. I need to transfer to another theater. Safine takes a deep breath and says, I will see what I can do. I know that this was probably hard for you to come to me about this, but I will follow up and get this rolling. I am so sorry that you feel unsafe in this environment. Steph wipes a tear from her eye and says, Thank you, Safine. That means a lot. Steph leaves her office and Safine radios for Nate to come to her office. Nate walks into her office and she asks him to close the door behind him and sit down. Dun, dun. Later that night, Buffy and Nate pull into the movie theater parking lot and park the car. Standing in front of the theater entrance was Bryce waiting in the cold. Buffy and Nate began walking up to the entrance to meet Bryce. As they approach him, Bryce says, I can't believe that we're actually going to do this. Nate walks to the doors and unlocks them with his keys. He says, well, it's technically not the first time, and we at least know what we're doing this time. The three of them walk quietly through the theater entryway, through box office, through the concessions lounge area, down the hallway, and into the break room where the entry point is. Following Nate is Buffy, and then Bryce is last, as they all begin walking down the concrete stairs into the dark room below them. Cold air runs by them as they get closer to the room. They get down to the dark room, and Buffy takes some candles out of her bag and places them on the table in the center of the room. She then pulls out the Ouija board and places it in the middle of the table. Nate lights the candles and then lights up a cigarette. Bryce looks at him and says, Really? Nate blows smoke past Bryce and says, Really? The two doorways that lead to an abyss stare back at them. They all wonder how far and where the doorways lead under the mall, but none of them are willing to find out. It's really quiet throughout the entire building and down the staircase to the Ouija room. The group is sitting around the board, but only Nate and Buffy are using it. Bryce is just sitting there shaking in fright of what could happen if this thing actually works. Almost 40 minutes go by, and still nothing has happened on the board. Buffy says, Nate, I don't think anything is going to happen tonight. Nate looks up at her and says, I swear it worked last time. Just try again. Bryce interrupts and says, Look, man, we've been trying for almost an hour and this thing doesn't work. Plus, it's freaking cold down here. Nate says, I know. You think they would want to talk. Buffy moves the device on the board around clockwise one more time and says, Does anyone want to talk to us? They all sit in silence waiting for the board to do something. Instead, the candles flicker out and a cold breeze shoots through the three of them. A deep, dark voice out of nowhere says, Get out. Nate breathes slowly and says, Did one of you just say that? Buffy and Bryce both shake their heads and say no together. Nate says, Buffy, close the gate. The voice speaks louder this time and appears in between Bryce and Nate. Get out, it says again. Bryce's face turns into a demon-looking gross fest. Pus starts popping from his cheeks, and slobber is dripping from his big puffed-up lips, and he starts laughing. Nate and Buffy scream. Buffy begins closing the gate by saying goodbye, and Bryce's face turns back to normal. They pack up their stuff and pretty much run out of the Ouija room. The building begins to shake a little bit as they run through the theater and out the front doors. Deep, dark laughing can be heard from the Ouija room in the abyss that was underneath the theater. Evil spreads throughout the building, laughing hysterically at the stupidity of the human being. Back to 2013 at Edgewater Sanitarium. Bryce is sitting at one of the cafeteria tables when another guy sits down opposite of him. The guy is a bigger guy and has brown hair and glasses. He looks at Bryce and says, "Hey there, I'm Barry. May I sit with you?" Bryce squints and says, "Sure, I am Bryce. What are you in for?" Barry starts eating his lunch, which wasn't much considering he ate a piece of toast first. He says, "Oh, nothing much really. I just think that my friends and I are a coven of witches trying to stop the devil's plan to destroy the world. What about you?" Bryce looks at him blankly and can't believe what he just heard. I mean, he was in this place because of a real-life accident, and this guy was talking about witches and the devil like it's a life story. Bryce wasn't crazy. He just had big issues that he needed to work on. Bryce finally says, "Third DUI. Killed a kid on accident, and apparently I'm the crazy one." Barry looks at him and says, "Damn, dude. That's rough. I thought I had issues. Well, I'll be around a lot in here, so if you ever need anything like smokes or anything, just let me know and I can help you out." Bryce says, "Thanks, but I don't smoke or anything." Barry finishes a bite of his chicken breast and says, "That's cool, dude. We all have our vices." Alright, there you have it, part 5, Unsane. We get to go inside Bryce's head and see what happened with him all those many years ago. Knowing that his mother and his father were killed in that car accident, and then that he had a third DUI and killed a little boy that he keeps seeing around the theater. So that could be why he keeps seeing the little boy. We don't know. But yeah, this takes a glimpse at Edgewater Sanitarium, which was featured in, if you guys pay attention, which was the sanitarium that Barry and his friends were in Confessions from Lost Souls. So this ties together that theory that this is in the same universe as Confessions from the Lost Souls. So that's good to know. So yeah, so Edgewater Sanitarium, that was the same insane asylum that Barry and Megan were in Lost Souls. So yeah. But yeah, and it looks like they opened the doorway again in the theater, which they're stupid. Corporate came in, which we got to finally meet some people from Othcorp, which we haven't really seen since, well, they've kind of been around. They're mostly in Hotel Hypnotico. They weren't much in Lost Souls. But the Damned, they show up at the end. And then the other, they own the theater. So that's, yeah. So they own the theater. And then when we get into future seasons, you'll also see more involvement with the Authority, as we like to call them, the big bad of the entire multiverse, as we call it. But yeah, so that's part 5 for you. So yeah, I think we have one more episode coming up after this, which is the Christmas episode. Yeah, it's part 1. And then we're going to go on a hiatus for Thanksgiving break. But yeah, so tune in next week. We'll have one more episode before we go on a break. And yeah, that's part 5 for you. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. And deuces.
You say I would've hit the ceiling. You said you said I should eat